The FCC granted SpaceX an upgraded license and told Dish Network to pound sand. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much once again joining me for tea time. Today we have a little bit of fireside. Oh good. I hope you're joining me with your cup of tea, maybe a cup of coffee, hanging out, talking tech, talking photo, talking video. Today is a technology day. We're going to be talking about Elon Musk's SpaceX Starlink and the FCC granting them an upgraded license and telling Dish Network to basically go pound sand. This is all good news for us Starlink users because by the end of this, we're going to end up with faster speeds. Can't beat that, right, guys? Can't beat that with a stick. So I was reading an article over on Space News, and then there was another one, I don't know, all over the place. I was reading a bunch of articles. I want to kind of distill some of this information down and give it to you. And then I want to hear from you. What do you think about all of this? Do you think it's going to help us? I do. What do you think is going to end up happening with the FCC and all the rest of these companies that are going after Elon Musk's SpaceX Starlink? They seem to not be doing well, right? That's all Elon needs is another DoD contract, and they're definitely going to be told to go pound sand by the FCC. Anyways, that's for a whole nother video. So I want to get into this article, and then I want to give you my commentary as I always do, but more importantly, I want to hear from you. Down below, let's hear your thoughts. What do you think about all this? Are you a Starlink user? If you are, what is your experience with it? I was reading some other articles. I'll probably do a video maybe tomorrow or the next day about it. How actually SpaceX Starlink is getting better reviews than fiber. It's just crazy. And other ISPs out there. And this is a satellite technology. That is not the norm. If you guys remember Viasat and HughesNet, what a big hill of garbage, right? Horrible latency, horrible service, absolutely horrible price contracts that you have to be sucked into for a year, 2 years. It was absolutely awful. So it's good to see those companies eventually going out of business and hopefully sooner and that later. They've already made enough money from us people in the rural areas, right? So SpaceX Starlink is here, and we're going to be talking about it. Now, before we get into this article, I want to say that if you haven't downloaded any of my ebooks, check them out. Just for you being here, they are free. Go to JCristina.com/books. If you enjoy the video, throw it a thumbs up. That's very, very helpful. Trust me, you don't believe it, but it is. Throw it a thumbs up. Also, subscribe if you're not already. If you are, thank you. I appreciate it. And then click this little notification button over here so when I go live or when a new video comes out, you'll be notified of it immediately. If you want more Starlink content like this, I have about 330 videos so far that I've put together for you in the last 41 months. Check them out. I'll put a link right here. Don't click it yet. I'll put a link here. So when you're done watching the video, click on that and you'll be able to see once again, a ton of videos I've put together. Helpful how-tos, tips, tricks, what to do, what not to do, what to buy, what not to buy. And more importantly, the why. This channel has always been about the why. And if you want to say thank you for all of my hard work, there's a little thank you button right down here that YouTube provided to us. Thank you, YouTube. Appreciate that. Click on that. Give $1 or $2 if you like. If not, that's perfectly fine. The video's still free. Consider becoming a member of the channel. That would be even better. So let's jump right into this article. Once again, I'll give you my commentary and then I want to hear from you. And if you don't want to write anything down below, just put an emoji. That's perfectly fine. Put a little rocket ship, put a satellite, put a poop emoji. I don't care. Put something down here so that I know that you actually watched the video. So the article starts out by saying, SpaceX has secured permission to gradually replace first-generation Starlink satellites with larger spacecraft designed to provide more broadband capacity. Very, very important there. The Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC, August 16th, modified the license that permits SpaceX to operate up to 4,408 Generation 1 satellites in low Earth orbit, or LEO. The modification allows SpaceX to deploy upgraded Starlink satellites under the Generation 1 license with technology developed for the company's second-generation constellation, which has a separate license permit up to 7,500 more satellites in LEO. So to break that down, basically what they're saying is you're going to be allowed to replace those Generation 1 satellites with Generation 2 technology, basically like your Starlink version 2 mini technology, with those satellites, all right? And it's going to be under the exact same license. Very, very, very important. So hang in there. It gets better. SpaceX has 6,325 Starlink satellites in orbit after beginning its launch campaign in 2019, according to statistics maintained by astrophysicist Jonathan McDowell, including 4,216 Generation 1 spacecrafts with a design life of around 5 years. Remember, 5 years, design life, end of life, 5 years. They went up in 2019, some of these spacecraft. They're now in 2024. What does that mean? End of life. A lot of these satellites are going to be coming back into orbit, and they're going to look like shooting stars as they burn up in our atmosphere. What's happening now is SpaceX is granted the means of replacing them, not with the older version, which they had license for, but for the newer versions, the Generation 2 minis. Really, really good. The company, which has launched more than 6,800 Starlink satellites to date, has also been seeking approval to deploy nearly 30,000 Generation 2 Starlinks. Now, the Generation 2, when they say Gen 2, it's not the satellites which we call the version 2 minis. The Generation 2s are actually the larger satellites that will not be able to be placed into orbit until the Starship actually is functional. It doesn't blow up, right? So hang in there for the Generation 2. So just keep that in mind. Whenever you hear they talk about Generation 2, that's what they're saying. The FCC said its modified license clears the way for Generation 1 Starlinks with upgraded beam forming and digital processing equipment, enabling SpaceX to provide broadband with narrower beams. This is really important. What this means is instead of having that big, large swath of area that beam or that cone of data is coming down, by them tightening up the beam, basically it gives them the ability to have better capacity, faster speeds, and there's other benefits too. We'll get into that in just a second. The latest Generation 1 Starlink satellites weigh around 300 kilograms, compared with roughly 800 kilograms for the largest satellites in SpaceX's current Generation 2 network. SpaceX ultimately plans to deploy Generation 2 Starlinks weighing about 2,000 kilograms once the next generation Starship rocket is in service. Once again, those larger satellites, the true Generation 2s, the version 2s, they're probably going to call them version 3s once they come out. That's my prediction here. They're going to have to wait for Starship because they're going to need that extra space up there in the fairing, in that cone at the top of the rocket, because they are so much bigger. SpaceX has also proposed deploying larger, upgraded Generation 1 Starlink satellites with two potential form factors, one to be launched with the Falcon 9 and one to be launched on the Starship. Again, those are the larger ones. Dish Network had asked the FCC to reject SpaceX's license modification request over concerns that the upgraded Generation 1 Starlink satellites would interfere with other communication systems. Once again, the FCC told Dish Network to go and pound sand. Love to see it. Love to see it. The satellite TV broadcaster, Dish Network, argued that SpaceX's use of smaller beams would violate rules governing satellite power limits, which the FCC dismissed, once again, telling Dish Network to go and pound sand. Quote, with this modification, SpaceX will utilize advanced beam forming technology, which will allow for narrow, more focused pointing to ground stations. With this more focused capability, SpaceX will be able to better comply with the conditions not to communicate in the same frequency with more than one satellite beam to any one area or overlapping areas at any time. So basically having that larger beam where you're getting this massive swath of coverage and there is overlap that happens by them focusing it with this new technology. It's simply going to be better, not worse, for Dish Network or any other company because there won't be that overlap, right? It'll be more focused. Once again, Dish Network is just trying their best. They're trying their best and they're failing horribly. And once again, we love seeing it. don't we? SpaceX must seek a mutually acceptable agreement with the National Science Foundation to mitigate the impact of satellites on optical ground-based astronomy, among other conditions tied to the modified license. That has always been an issue because the satellites, they do have that shine to them, all right? And then when you're trying to look into space, you end up with all of these streaks coming by. Not very good, of course, for ground-based astronomy, right? You don't want to see the stars and then all of these lines going through them. It's not good. Not good at all. SpaceX has employed measures to mitigate this shine, so you don't see them as readily once they are in their operational orbit, which is about 530 to 550 kilometers. And what they've done is they've put some, let's say, matte paint over it so that it is more matte, it doesn't reflect the sun. Also, they have the ability to adjust their angle so that it reflects the sun off the Earth in comparison to onto the Earth. And that helps also for the glare, so you don't end up with that glare shooting right on a specific area on the planet. This is what ends up happening when you see all these UFO sightings, right? And they said, yeah, we saw about 22 UFOs going in this line in the night sky across, and then all of a sudden they just disappeared. Poof. Well, the reason they disappeared is because when they saw them is because the reflection was hitting their location on Earth, right? But then as soon as they turned slightly, they're gone immediately. So that's one of the things that SpaceX does once they do end up in LEO. When you first see that train, they're still sitting at about, let's say, 200-300 kilometers. They still have to elevate. They still have to get up to their operational orbit, which is once again 530, 550 kilometers. Now, one of the most important statements here, last statement actually, is although SpaceX has received FCC authorization, it doesn't plan to rapidly deorbit the existing first-generation Starlink satellites. Rather, it seeks only to replace those satellites with upgraded hardware when those Starlink satellites reach the end of their planned operational period, basically end of life. Now, we know a lot of those satellites that went up there, those first generation, they went up in 2019. We're now in 2024. That's 5 years. Their operational length or duration or operational period is 5 years. So it's getting really close to time to deorbit those satellites. And now that the FCC has granted SpaceX the ability to deorbit one of those Starlink satellite generation ones, the older ones, the ones that do not have laser communications built on board. So they're not actually part of that mesh system that goes around the planet, that's SpaceX Starlink. Only half of the satellites that are currently up there actually have those lasers that forms that mesh. All the other ones are kind of like individually hanging out, doing their own thing. So they're trying to get rid of those, and now that they're end of life, that's what's going to end up happening. As they deorbit 5, 10, 15, 100 at a time, however they need to do so, they're going to be able to launch and replace those with the Starlink version 2 minis under the same license. That is awesome. So it doesn't impede on their current license and kind of use their old license to backfill those Starlink satellites with the newer models. So what's going to end up happening is we're going to get faster speeds, number one, and also we're going to get more reliable speeds. And the reason being is, once again, the replacements are the top of the line version 2 minis. That's awesome. Eventually, once Starship gets up there, like they were talking about here, and the next generation, they call them generation 2 Starlink satellites, the big ass ones, as I call them, which are 2,000 kilograms in comparison to 800, or the smaller ones are like 300 or something. 2,000, they are like twice the size, but they offer like 4 times the capacity, 4 times the speed. So once those get up there, things are going to change rapidly down here on Earth with SpaceX Starlink. I think we're going to see some speeds that are going to be absolutely amazing every day. I think we're going to see upload speeds that are going to be in the 40, 50 megabits per second without a problem. We're going to see download speeds probably close to a gigabit, maybe 600 megabits per second. Shouldn't be a problem, especially for business class. And I think that the latency is going to drop also to that sub 20 milliseconds. Right now, we're sitting anywhere from about 25 milliseconds to 35 milliseconds. Elon Musk said, our goal is sub 20 milliseconds. Why? Because I'm a gamer, I love playing Diablo 4, and I don't like having any type of latency and not seeing what is going on and end up dead and not even know that I'm dead. So we need to make sure that we have really low latency, because if you're playing like a first-person shooter game or even Diablo 4 or an MMO or anything that latency really affects your gameplay, you're going to want the lowest latency possible, right? So by him saying it's going to be sub 20 milliseconds, I am going to concur with that. I will say that we will see anywhere from 14 to 15 milliseconds from SpaceX Starlink. Not that long from now, especially when we see the next generation satellites up there that once again will not be able to get into orbit until the Starship actually launches and doesn't blow up and doesn't have any kind of problems. Most likely that's going to happen first quarter of 2025. That's my prediction. We will see how that ends up going. And also, these satellites will not be called Generation 2s. They'll be called, most likely, SpaceX Starlink version 3s. 3.0s, let's call it. So instead of going with the 2.0 mini and then eventually just launching 2s, it's just not going to happen. It's been way too long for that. So I think they're just going to call them version 3s, which will be generation 2 Starlink satellites. They'll eventually get the numbers right. Anyways, guys, I hope you found this interesting. If you did, once again, throw the video a thumbs up. That would be awesome. And finally, head over to my website, JCristina.com, where you can find all the photography tools I've invented for you and me over the many years, and hopefully there's something there that you might like. And if there is, please pick it up and support me and my family. Check out my merch, my shirts, my tees, my book, and everything else. If there's something you like, once again, pick it up. It would be awesome. Much appreciated. Finally, many blessings to you and your family. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay connected. We'll see you in the next one. Love you guys. Take care.